Hello and welcome to the Pro Dota 2 National Cup here on Pro Dota Ian on Hitbox. This is going to be a best of one between Team Bosnia and Team Denmark. Whoever wins this will be in the upper bracket. Whoever loses is not out of the tournament but will be bumped down into the lower half of the bracket for the next stage of competition. We're going to start off our draft with an IO first pick for Team Bosnia and a tiny Lena response from Denmark. Pretty interesting there. The IO first pick is something that Bosnia are very comfortable with, or at least their players are individually, so I can understand that. And then the response to it is equally as interesting. The tiny in response is going to deny away one of the best combos with the IO, but at the same time, there's still so many left in the pool that I think it's worthwhile for Bosnia to still go for that first pick, even though the Tiny response is very strong against it. Tiny works great in combination with the IO, but is also very good at bursting down the IO, and especially in combination with the Lena, the amount of magic nuke damage that Team Denmark have is absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. They really just ooze an amount of nuke that can't really be managed by IO or Slaughter even. BKB from Slaughter is going to be almost mandatory this game after his blink or whatever mobility item the Slaughter favors. Force Staff has been very popular as of late, and against the Clockwork might be a better option than blink. Although, really, just up to personal preference, although it looks like Force Staff is going to be very important this game for somebody on Bosnia to pick up. This Clockwork from the side of Denmark is going to give them a reliable initiator. Once you get level 6 on the Clockwork, and once you get levels on the Tiny and the Blink Dagger up for him, it really feels like both of these teams are going to have a lot of ways to start fights. And the amount of aggression is going to peak and valley depending on when those item timings are there, and with how these teams are positioned on the map and whether or not they feel they can go for smoke rotations. This should be a very quick tempoed game after about the first 10 minutes. And even before then, maybe there's going to be some kill opportunities across the map. Really just depends on how active these supports are going to be. Looks like a support Lena will be the choice for Team Denmark, as now they pick up the Wind Ranger to go into their mid lane. Right now, Bosnia have not shown their mid, but no matter what it is, usually Wind Ranger is fairly adept at dealing with it. Queen of Pain is still available in the pool and wouldn't be a bad option at all for Team Bosnia. Another not bad option for them would be to go for the Gyrocopter, although it does combo very well with the IO. The lanes, you'd put the IO Slaughter and the dual lane offlane together, which could work very nicely in and of itself, and then partner up the IO with something later down the line once you get that Blink Dagger up on the Slaughter. It could be interesting to see Bosnia go for something along those lines. The IO Bane is a support duo that, although directly isn't going to be super synergistic, they're able to set up so nicely for the Slaughter and now the Invoker thrown in the mix for Team Bosnia. There is a lot of follow-up to the Nightmare initiation coming up from the Bane. You get a Nightmare into Crush, into Sunstrike, and easy kills across the map if they're able to isolate a hero coming out from Denmark. Really a very interesting draft from both of these sides. I'm not sure who I'd favor as this goes late. I'm tempted to say Denmark. The Wind Ranger and the Tiny have such a great ability at getting pickoffs and transitioning those pickoffs into high ground pushes so very swiftly. With the Focus Fire and the Tiny, once both of them get their Aghanim Scepters up, have an immense amount of damage that they can deal to structures. And I'm kind of liking Denmark's overall plan a little bit better. It feels like their team is less reliant on the Blink on Tanya, although of course that is a very good option. Even without the Blink, setting up kills for them should be fairly easy, especially at long range with the Clockwork. Eclipses the initiation power of the Bane, at least until much later on once Bane gets his own positioning tools. But Bane kind of relies on being involved in kills in order to get those items up and running. Is not an incredibly fast farmer by any means. Disruptor will be the last band coming out from Team Bosnia. Looks like they might have another IO partner in mind other than this Slaughter. Although I think IO's Slaughter is perfectly acceptable for Bosnia. It could just be an offlane Slaughter too. Or those dual lanes I was talking about earlier. For Denmark here, another support for them. Wonder what it's going to be. Skywrath Mage could be incredibly annoying. They already have so much damage, it's really hard to suggest a Sky, but You can't really say no to more unless it's or say no to more damage unless it's going to come in a detriment to your lanes or to your game plan in general. Having an additional silence against the Invoker is going to be very useful. Another way to cancel Bane's Fiend's Grip, and even if you've already blown the Ancient Seal, just drop a Mystic Flare on Bane, and he really is stuck in a situation where he probably dies if he stands inside of it, but really wants to channel that Fiend's Grip regardless. Really up to them as far as supports have been left through to the pool. Not a huge amount of them have been banned out. Dazzle, Disruptor, Winter Wyvern, and Tusk. These are some of the bigger supports that are popular right now, but something like an Earthshaker, any sort of stun setup early for the Lina could be acceptable, but instead they're going to go for a Chen. Very interesting coming out from Team Denmark. This is going to give them early push, and across the board, it feels like they have a team that's very good at capitalizing off of the ganks that are going to come out from the Clockwork, and in general, at all points in this game, they're going to have a way to turn pickoffs and early advantage into map control and into objectives for their side. The same can't really be said for Bosnia, although they are very good at getting those pickoffs, don't get me wrong. Their tower damage is much more limited than the side of Denmark. It does put a good amount of pressure on the likes of Clockwork, Windranger, and Tiny to perform, to find those picks to transition into the push, but I think it should work out pretty nicely for them. And in general, Denmark feel like they have a very self-contained draft. For Team Bosnia here, not sure what this last pick is going to be. There's so many different options for them with how they can shake these lanes down. It could be something to go mid lane. Bane Invoker would be a reasonable dual lane in top, and Io as well as Slaughter could go bottom, or they have an offlane spot that could be shifted if they want to safe lane farm the Slaughter, or they have an offlane spot, or a safe lane spot. I mean, there's really just everything Bosnia could do with this pick. Probably not one of their supports. Bane and Io should have that on lockdown. I wonder what they feel is going to be the best option for it, and it's going to be a bristleback for them. Bosnia looks to be very interested in just taking brawls. I probably don't need these team flags, as it looks like both of these teams do have a flag up on their side. No, Bosnia don't. We'll add theirs back in. Thanks for tuning in here to HeflaTV Pro Dota EN. Should be a pretty good best of one. What's on the line here? Both of these teams are fighting for a slot in the upper bracket in the next round of the tournament. And we'll have to see how this works out for either side. The thing that I like most about the Bosnia lineup is the fact that they built so very nicely around this Io. They have heroes that can set up kills globally. Nightmare into Relocate is a pretty scary combo. They have a lot of global presence, and maybe most importantly is the fact that they have a lot of heroes that benefit from being partnered up with the Io early on. A sprinting Slaughter that has the extra movement speed from Tether of an Io is very scary, and in general could work out nicely for them. Sorry about this, forgot to change my minimap size, so I'll do that now. And now back to the game as everybody gets out to these lanes. Invoker, this is a really crazy set. I'm not sure if you could add any more frills onto this guy. He looks to be going towards the mid lane with a safe lane farming Slaughter, supported by the Bane, and then an Io Bristleback dual lane off lane. Fair enough. Both of these lanes coming out from Bosnia should be able to get a reasonable amount of farm against the enemy. The safe lane farming Tiny could find it very difficult against the Bristleback in particular. Already, Tiny suffers from having very low amounts of armor. Starts out with 0. And in general is going to be taking so much damage from the quills, and then add a little bit minus armor to the mix, and those quills really do start to add up when it comes to the damage that they're able to do to the opponent. And it's going to require a lot of focus from these supports to keep the Tiny safe, which might come to the detriment to their other lanes. The Windranger versus Invoker matchup could go either way. Probably Windranger favored, especially since she has just a more reliable way to push out the wave. But especially with the more common build of going for early point, or an early point into Wex so you can have Alacrity for the laning stage, Invoker's ability to CS against the Windranger is quite solid. Looks like they're going to give this Io the rune, or not, actually. The Io's bottle is going to be a little bit delayed because of it, but it buys Invoker a salve. Or what I presume to be a salve flying out to him on the courier. A little unfortunate for the Io, but not that big of a deal. It's going to have that tick gold before the minute mark. And Vito will be able to go down to the bottom lane and help out his buddy Bristleback. Looks like they didn't destroy any trees around here to look for double stacks, as they probably shouldn't. The ones that they were breaking were mostly down towards the bottom area to make sure they're able to stack up Ancients, which is something that Bristleback, especially when partnered up with the IO, can very easily farm for himself. Once you get like 3 points up in the Quills, I'd say, although it really is just game dependent. By himself, Bristleback needs a little bit more than that, but when partnered up with the IO, usually that extra sustain is enough. Another big question mark about this early laning stage is how well the Chen's going to do and what he'll accomplish early on. Right now he's going to make himself or somebody else a stack. There are a couple heroes in this game that could pull that out. Right now Clockwork is getting zoned pretty heavily up in the top lane. Trading hits with the Bane doesn't work out super well for him, and it's going to be forced to use the salve. Still, this Clockwork should be able to get a good amount of experience. The lane's going to push back into him, and there's really not much that the Slaughter can do about it. Although the Bane does have access to the pole camp and is going to look for a pull now, the Clockwork's still going to find himself level 2 in a bit. Mid lane matchup for now is going very well in favor of Fury. Wind Ranger, as is pretty much on lockdown. Although we are going to see that very early point in Alacrity I was talking about a little bit early on, it doesn't seem like that's nearly enough to combat against the power shot harass, and right now he's running without quas points. Although the Invoker is not super far behind, this is something that he can come back from. Invoker doesn't benefit nearly as well from stacks as other mid laners, and his jungle farming efficiency is very low. You want to make sure that he has a good time in lane, which is not something that's necessarily easy to do, especially with this massive amount of poke from the Wind Ranger. Since she has the Wind Run, there's not much the Invoker can throw out that scares her, really. Just pop that Wind Run and then you're free to trade hits to your heart's content. As far as the safe lane farmers are concerned, both of them are having very different experiences in this laning stage. The Tiny isn't able to farm comfortably against the Bristleback IO by any means, and the Slaughter is getting pretty much absolute free farm against the Clockwork. Clockwork isn't able to apply very much pressure at all, so we could be seeing a very early Blink Dagger for the Slaughter, although he'll probably back off for treads first. No matter, it's going to come online at a very fast timing, and probably at a similar timing window when you have Relocate up for the IO and the Ultimate up for the Bane. The amount of kill setup you get from that is pretty darn ridiculous. Even though Tiny's having a difficult time in the laning stage when it comes to picking up farm, he's actually come back nicely now that the lane was pushed back in his side. So, you know, he's not suffering that much, and even without a large level of gold, Tiny's still able to contribute with just the Avalanche Toss combo, especially in the IO that I talked about very early on the draft, but even the Bane, the Invoker, and to a lesser extent the Slaughter can very easily get caught out by a good combo. And while speaking about getting caught out, Bane is stuck inside the cogs. Looks like it's only level 1 battery assault, however, and now the Clockwork needs to be very careful. The battery assault will continue ticking, and as soon as it wears off, they're going to look to get in range for a Crush. Crush will connect. The right clicks afterwards with the Brain Sap is going to be lethal, and that's going to be Bosnia drawing first blood against the side of Denmark. Bane is the one to pick up the first blood gold. Nice to get him boots or what have you this early on. Could be very useful for him, but down bottom lane we have a bit of a scuffle happening with a lot of quills stacking up on this Lina, as well as 3 points in that nasal goo. They'll toss the Bristleback away, but I'm not sure if that's going to save the Korean zombie. He's salving up. They're going to cancel his salve, but Lina still survives yet. Tiny has 1 spell to throw out, but not going to be lethal on anybody. And that's just a taste of things to come. As soon as this Bristleback gets sustained a little bit more, can do so much with that extra mana from the IO. Speaking of the IO, going to bump into the Chen inside the river area. Dragon Slave going to miss, so it looks like the IO is going to survive. Now Buddy up back with the Bristleback, as he's going to be able to post up on the Tiny, at least for a little while, as the 2 bottle charges are available there for the IO. 1-0 is our kill score. For the most part, these lanes are going to remain static because we have a jungler on the side of Denmark. And although, in theory, Chen is able to make a lot of rotations early on, it doesn't feel like this is the style of Chen that we're going to see today. He's been more interested in just stacking up and power farming for himself. Maybe an early mechanism for the team could be a very good and standard choice. We'll have to see what he settles on and what the game plan for Denmark is with this Chen. Out of the 2 ways to play him, I think going super aggressive could have been interesting, but right now, having a double tornado on bottom lane is going to put a lot of damage onto this Bristleback. They'll throw an Avalanche his way too. And in general, just be very annoying with these tornadoes. Like, look at Bristleback's HP pool. He's going to have to back off and salve here. He should be successful in doing so, might even give the salve to the IO. And will do just that to ensure that he's able to get as much value from it as possible. The Chen is going to slow down a little bit of his farm for this, but he's doing well when it comes to levels. He has access to 2 creeps and has killed one of his wild wings, it seems. No mana on this Wild Gleam Reaper, pretty useless, but Tiny is going to take a lot of stacks of that goo and a couple more quills going his way. He's going to be forced to toss the Bristleback away. This is a benefit of having Tiny in the safe lane as opposed to another immobile melee carry. At least he has some sort of defensive play against the old run-at-you strat, which is the one that Bristleback uses almost exclusively. Still, this mid lane is going very well for Denmark, although not as terribly as it was early on for the Invoker. Still about 10 CS more than the Voker here. Getting his levels, however, the Invoker, really that's all he needs in order to survive, but a very interesting skill build coming out from him. 3 points in the quest to deal with the amount of poke that's coming out from the Wind Ranger. This is going to hurt their ability to get kills with the Sunstrike, I'd expect. But Io down towards bottom lane is going to die to the Tiny. It looks like he just got too low and was tossed down. With 3 points in toss, you do need to be very careful with your HP pool. Sorry for missing that one on camera, but just a clean, easy kill for the Tiny as they caught vision with this lane ward that was placed down. I don't think Io expected the vision to be there, or at least wasn't on the mind. The offlane for the side of Denmark, the Clockwork has managed to find himself level 4, but not until you get level 6 on this Clockwork can it be super aggressive. And in mid lane, maybe with the smoke up from the Lina and the Chen army, they might be able to kill off this Invoker. He does have Ghost Walk available to him, but he's netted down to the ground. He's still shown here. Do they have a sentry? They do, and they're going to be able to burst him down. Chen with the Test of Faith will find Invoker's Faith wanting. They'll chase forward for the Wind Ranger. Not going to be able to get in range. Slaughter his sprint just not nearly as good as Windrun. And here comes the Clockwork. Again, only 1 point in the battery, so won't be able to find that kill. Now down towards bottom lane, they're going to leave the Tiny alone against the Bristleback. A bit of a mess in the mid lane, but favors Denmark quite handily. A clean kill on the Invoker that forces out mass rotations. They were prepared for the Ghost Walk. It's very common to see that early point into Wex, but it's actually not going to be an Exhort Invoker after all. Even though he starts out with the early point Exhort, he's gone back for what seems to be a Wex build. Very, very interesting. We'll have to see how this pays off for him, but mana burning a Tiny in particular is going to be very useful for them, and extra control is going to be super nice. Although, personally, I might have liked the Exhort Invoker a little bit more for the minus armor to throw in the mix with the Forge Spirits, but down towards bottom lane, Tiny going to try and toss back the Bristleback, but just can't quite find an angle for it, and that's going to be the death of him. The Bristleback finds a very easy kill, really. It was only a matter of time, I'd expect, before that Tiny goes down if he's left completely alone by the supports. Still at level 7, his burst combo is very close to just straight up lethal on the Io if overcharge isn't involved. And with any sort of damage on top of that, could still be involved in a couple of kills if they're set up like they were previously by that Chen. Chen, what are you spending your gold on? And generally, he's been pulling up a lot, but in mid lane, they're going to get a Brain Sap onto this Wind Ranger still. With the Hand of God now, they want to turn around. Nice shackle onto the Bane. They'll catch him inside the cogs, tossing the damage is there. That's going to be a nice kill for Denmark, although they have to involve a lot of their team. And now here comes the Bristleback. He has a Vitality Booster, is very tanky. Deafening Blast from low ground is going to catch a couple of these Chen creeps. This doesn't stop the nukes. They'll shackle him to a tree, toss him in the air. The Bristleback will go down, but not before taking out the Chen with a couple of quills that were procced, with all of that damage being dealt. Tiny's looking a bit like a pincushion, trying to chase forward. They toss in the Chen creeps. They have a net, but with the tether away, the Eye will be just fine. That was a cute exchange. The Tiny Chen combo is always a little bit fun to watch when you are able to toss in those creeps, making up for their lack of mobility. It's effectively like handing this Centaur a blink dagger or giving him wings. Tiny's just teaching his little buddies how to fly. 4-3 is our kills score, and that's going to favor Denmark because the Bristleback gets a little bit over-aggressive there. Caught out with the entire enemy team. Even though he does kill off the Chen in return, and that's nice and all for the Bristleback, the real good news for Bosnia is the fact that this Slaughter is farming up a lot in the top lane. He's the top of the net worth chart, he's CSing very well for himself, and will now, with the help of the Io, start pushing down this lane with a little bit of extra mana sustain thrown here and there. With the bottle, he can very liberally spam out those crushes should he need to. This early blink dagger on the Slaughter could change things a lot for them. He's going to start crushing down this stack that was over in the sidelines, and Io can assist with these spirits here and there as they're going to explode and put these creeps down closer to lethal range. And Milan, after finishing up that entire stack, is just 100 gold or so shy of having that blink dagger done. That's really where Bosnia can start picking up the aggression. But even without that aggressive tool, they're still doing just fine for themselves and should have a slight advantage when it comes to the gold that they picked up for themselves. Although experience is almost dead even. If anything, a slight advantage for Denmark, but only 20 experience. That means next to nothing at this point. Chen is smoked up again. He's actually gone a lot more aggressively than I thought he would based on his early start. He has arcane boots and half of a mechanism. He's doing quite well for himself when it comes to his net worth and progression inside this game. Being involved in 4 kills for the team, every single one of these kills for Team Denmark has involved the Chen. It looks like they might find another one on the Invoker. He's going to invoke Ghost Walk, but they have Dust on the clockwork. Can they quite get in range? It looks like no. With the relocate him from the Isle, they get on the backlines, kill off the Lina, but shackled up, Milan as well as the Bane could be in a little bit of trouble. They're getting mauled by this army of Chen creeps and brought down by the test of faith. Tether away, relocate out. The IO is going to be just fine up in the top lane where they brought the Slardar from. That death on Slardar is unfortunate for Bosnia. Don't get me wrong, it is their safe lane farmer falling, only getting a support in trade, but at least he bought the Blink Dagger before he died, so he hardly lost any gold. The end exchange really is the fact that Chen is able to get a huge amount of money, which he's going to turn into that mechanism for the team. He's the real big beneficiary from that last exchange, and we've seen how powerful these Chen creeps are early on. TP into the tower, coming out from Slaughter. They want to get a blink crush on this Chen, it seems. They're going to ignore the army and sprint forward, but just don't quite have the vision. The Dire team don't know where the Chen is, and they can't go for that play blind. Can they kill off these Chen creeps? They're going to be sent home. They cold snap one and bring down the Dark Troll. Or not the Dark Troll, but the Satyr, rather. The Dark Troll will be able to escape home freely. Such a big rotation for Bosnia, and all they get is one Chen creep in return. Not a big deal for them, but down the bottom lane, Tiny's going to take a lot of damage from this Bristleback. Again, thrown away. No, Bristleback, you can't chase me, but still, it's an advantageous trade when it comes to the harass that Bristleback's able to do against this Tiny, who is desperately saving up for that Blink Dagger. Once he has this Blink, getting solo kills for Tiny is very feasible for them. But until then, it is going to be a bit of a slow road for him. Well, if they give him this stack, that would help out a lot. The Avalanche toss, and they'll be able to bring down these creeps. So, some of the skeletons, but with another punch, Tiny finds himself the gold for the Blink Dagger, and will be sent back to base. Efficiency coming out from the side of the Radiant with that new Blink Dagger, and a smoke purchased up by the Chen. Looks like they are ready and willing to go. Let's see where this first Blink Dagger gank from the Tiny is going to land them. 5-4 is our kill score, and in general, although the gold is slightly favoring Bosnia, this game could go either way. This is the part where those peaks and valleys start coming into play with the power levels of all of these heroes. In general, the Blink Dagger on the Slardar, the first showing of that wasn't all that impressive, but now it looks like the Blink Dagger on Tiny is going to look for a kill onto the Slardar. As he blinks in and commits onto the clockwork, they relocate in a handful of heroes, but an Avalanche toss kills off the IO, and now they leave the Invoker completely alone. He'll get the clockwork kill in return, drops the Tornado and runs into the trees, but Power Shot, ooh, that misses. And, well, still with the toss, as well as the Shackle and Light Strike all connected, it's a double kill for the Tiny. Now that's the way to show off your Blink. They probably didn't expect Tiny to have his Blink Dagger at such a good window, considering how slow his start was against the Bristleback. I don't think they were super concerned, although it was bubbling under the surface. Maybe they didn't expect it until like 13.5 minutes, but Tiny, since picking up that Blink, has already gotten 2 kills with it. Avalanche toss combo is no joke. Io's HP pool just isn't high enough for him to be able to survive against the Ava toss plus a couple of right clicks after the fact. Clockwork will go down to the bottom lane, still has his hookshot available, but probably won't be able to do anything with it. A max flare build coming out from the clock, pretty standard fare here, but it is going to hurt his solo kill potential a little bit. He'd want to be partnered up with somebody else, anybody else from Denmark in order to get these pickoffs. But speaking of pickoffs, looks like it's Bosnia to look for the next aggressive move. The Blink and Slaughter, they're going to bump into the clockwork, but it is nighttime after all, so they're not going to be able to maintain vision of them. Don't actually drop the amp damage. Looks like this rotation from the Slaughter is just going to turn into a push onto the tier 1 tower in bottom lane that was already pretty beat up, as Bristleback has been playing pretty aggro in this lane and keeping the pressure applied down here, and now Alacrity on the Invoker. They'll be able to take it out. A couple more right clicks, Slaughter gets the destruction. Now they want to defend their tower top. Bristleback's the first one to TP, and even though he's stunned, it really doesn't bother the Bristle too much. We've seen him go into 1v4 situations before, and this time's no real exception. But in mid lane, this is the real issue for them. The fact that the Chen Army plus Wind Ranger are taking down your tier 2 tower in mid lane. To relocate again. EMP Tornado combo is going to be dropped down to the ground. It will drain the Chen creeps of their mana, but with a Shackle Shot connecting, The Invoker really can't chase for much more. The Chen is going to be isolated. Tether forward onto the Slaughter. Can he find initiation angle? Avalanche toss going to miss onto the Io. Hits a creep instead, unfortunately for him. Bo1 is going to get clapped down. Shackled to the Invoker. Nicely done. They're going to be able to kill off another with the Brain Sap and a couple of Wisp Orbs. They get the Clockwork kill in return. Now the Bristleback's in the middle of the fray, but they're going to toss him in the air. Fiend's Grip in return. The Tiny is going to be dropping low. Can they quite get enough quills? They're focusing his front, so the answer is no. Laguna Blade and Bane is going to be dropped low. The stun isn't going to connect from the Centaur. With the help of the overcharge of the Io, the Bane will survive. And Bosnia will get out with their 2 supports, but what does that matter when they lose the tier 2 tower and when they lose so many of their core heroes? Clockwork's the only one to die, and I'll be honest, his death really doesn't matter all that much. Clockwork has level 8, that's pretty much what you need to contribute inside these fights. If you go in, you set up a successful fight for your team, and then you go down, it doesn't bother you at all if you're the Clockwork. In Denmark, after a couple of these pickups, have been able to set up very good aggressive vision on the enemy side of the map. The Radiant team know pretty much everything about what's going on the enemy side. They have 4 wards that have beautiful coverage. Bosnia are rotating over towards their Ancients, which they are going to farm up, but even this rotation is known. And Denmark, now with this extra bit of map vision, should be able to find a lot of pickoffs. Tiny's going to go for drums after going for his blink. Will delay his Aghanim Scepter, sure, but he is battle ready. Level 11 Tiny with drums and blink daggers. A pretty happy Tiny, in fact, is out farming the Bristleback. Although the Bristleback's incredibly tanky on the front lines, and he's going to go for Sanch and Yashin next, which is a great item to transition Bristleback into more of a carry role. It hasn't really felt like this early Vanguard, and the early farm that they've given to the Bristle has meant nearly as much as the farm on the enemy's side, as Tiny's able to set up kills with the Blink, Ava, Toss, and the Slider, although, of course, he's not doing poorly, like 2, 2, and 3 is not a bad KD. It feels like Bosnia are getting outmaneuvered a little bit inside these fights, and with so many shackles landing, it's really hard to move around inside these engagements safely. You need to constantly be aware of these angles. Not going to catch an Milan here, who has gone for a Midas. I don't mind this Midas pickup at all for the Slider. Extra levels on the hero is nice to get level 16 for the max power on the amp, but more importantly, Slider's a hero that suffers when it comes to his ability to find farm pretty much ever. So that might as well mean that he's not going to be completely outrun by Denmark. But even if this Slider gets a lot of items, I'd say that the Wind Ranger uses that farm more effectively as Bane gets blown up top lane, then a straight TP out by the Tiny, and he's going to be just fine. He knows that he can go for that because everybody else is spotted. It's really just not a good map to be a support. If Tiny knows that there's nobody immediately behind you that can save your life, he's just going to go. Of course, the Bristleback is a different story entirely. Like, you can't kill off the Bristleback, but if you TP away from the Bristle, he can't kill you. Chen has been a little bit quiet for a while, but farming up very well. This Chen is the 3rd highest farmer on the team, which I suppose comes as no surprise since Clockwork's farm. It really isn't all that impressive, as flash firing mechanisms are much less than that of a Chen inside the jungle, of course. Clockwork is going to get the tower denial up towards top, however, which is going to remove a little bit of the map control, as Lina in the river going to be dropping incredibly low, but with the mechanism, with the hand of God, the Korean zombie will throw another stun, but won't connect on the Slider. But then again, neither will the Crush. Laguna Blade, point blank into Milan, and she will still survive for a little while longer until the Urn takes her down. Not going to be lethal, survives on single digits of HP as they get an Avalanche toss onto the Io. That is such a close call for the Lina, and she'll live and get a D-ward off the back of it. They know that the Bristleback's rotated over towards this river area. Again, Denmark's vision is really what's giving them such an advantage inside all of these ganks. And inside all of these team fights, 13-6, Denmark are looking good to take out this best of 1. Now, if you're on the side of Bosnia, you need to make sure that you look for some sort of kills. This Wex Invoker also just isn't doing very much for the team. The Wex combo, in theory, is really good, and something I didn't talk about at length earlier is the EMP against the Chen army is incredibly useful, as you're going to be able to deny away those spell usages pretty reliably, even at lower levels of EMP. But usually when you look for this Wex Invoker, you're going to try to see him be involved very early on, catch out combos, get some kills, but Invoker has been very passive. With this passive style of play, I think Exhort would have suited them a little bit better. They're going to take down the tier 1 tower in bottom lane, although they haven't yet taken Roshan, Denmark. They very easily could if they just refresh the HP pools on these Chen creeps if they send them home. Could very easily do just that. The Invoker is going to try to move around inside Ghostwalk, and he is moving very swiftly as he looks for these ganks, but his solo kill potential just isn't nearly as impressive as like that of the Tiny. Of course, Invoker can pull off kills if you found the Lina solo. But the Lena's hardly ever going to be alone. As I say that, she is currently pushing out on top pretty aggressively, but not going to be caught out there because she knows that nobody's around the corner. It really just goes to show how powerful wards are if they're not taken away, and if Bosnia don't have map control, how difficult it is for them to be able to pull off this Slardar IO combination across the map. This is ideally supposed to set up kills for them, but they're just lacking damage, which is something you hardly ever say for a draft that has a Slardar involved in it. The amp damage just isn't quite doing enough for them. They're lacking a little bit more oomph, and I think that oomph should be coming from the Invoker. They need to involve the Invoker in some of these kills. Maybe smoke up with him in the Slaughter and then relocating the Bristle, but an Avalanche Toss. Bane is going to be cratered in mid. They don't even need the Power Shot or the Flare. Of course, Bane doesn't instantly die to the Avalanche Toss, but 2 auto attacks plus the Avalanche Toss, and you betcha he's down. And then they also have the Flare and the Power Shot to back him up very easily globally. Focusing down this Shen, the Bristleback's found a very tasty target to go on towards, gets a crush into both him and the Clockwork. But the Tiny's able to kill off the IO in the backlines, and is now going to look towards another couple of these kills. This Slaughter is sprinting away, a Blink Dagger cools down, Avalanche is going to connect, he will have the mana if he tread switches or pops his wand, and will be able to toss the Clockwork, but it wasn't even necessary. The Quills being sprayed are going to secure a double kill for the Bristleback, but he's just not quite doing enough. Will that last Quill be lethal? No! The Tiny and the Wind Ranger survive on very low amounts of HP, what they wouldn't pay for a large level Sunstrike from the Invoker here. Even level 1 Sunstrike almost would have been lethal on the Tiny, but I suppose he's just a little too tanky. His max HP pool, even though it looked really low, it was still above the kill threshold of 100 damage Sunstrike. Invoker is going to try to chase down maybe a couple of these Chen creeps and play aggressively, but again, Bosnia, the only thing they're getting inside these fights is the Clockwork, and I've already kind of touched on it. Clockwork doesn't really care. He has his Force Staff, he has his ability to contribute inside these fights, and although he dies, he puts the Bristleback inside the cogs, and inside the cogs, the Bristleback can't do anything about it since nobody on his own team has the Force Staff. Doesn't matter how swift you're moving with that Sanj and Yasha if you're hitting an impassable wall. Shadowblade would be the choice for Tiny. I think this might be a little bit of initiation overkill coming out from the Tiny, but it's such a good item for getting solo pickoffs. One Shadowblade hit from the Tiny and it demolishes like an IO. And even a Slaughter, like, look at that. Milan almost dies straight up to that combo, but now partnered up with the IO will get healed up, and it looks like the Tiny's gonna have to retreat. That's an unfortunate way for them to show off the Shadowblade, as it doesn't actually get the Tiny anything. But imagine if that hero had, like, 100 less HP. Would have been very easy kills, but maybe they're able to punish the Tiny here. He's going to toss the Slaughter away. EMP is going to connect and does quite a lot of damage in combination with the Spirits. They had perfect vision with the Amplify, and Milan is chasing forward, but he gets craggied. Oh no! His Blink Dagger is still being cancelled, the Tiny, with another Blink in from the Slaughter. They'll get him eventually. Wicked Sick goes the way of the Slaughter, and just like that, he has the 2 components towards BKB. Now that's Tiny going a little too aggressively, but on the other side of the map, the Bristleback also goes down towards his side, which really is going to put a damper on things, especially considering the tier 3 tower is getting chunked by these Chen creeps. They're going to take it down to about half HP, and Bosnia don't have a great way to repel this. One of the other big weaknesses of Bosnia's lineup is their lack of wave clear, and it really makes this Chen pick all the more powerful for them, especially once he gets that Aghanim Scepter. Although, in theory, they're able to take down these Ancients fairly effectively. It's going to be very difficult for them to find that space to just focus down a singular Ancient that's magic immune. Although with the amp damage, with the Bristleback, and just the right clicks of those two, if they get on top of it, it very well could happen. But right now, Bosnia are on the warpath. They want to go for a smoke. They need to find some kills to get them back inside this game, and this is the necessary play that they have to make. They're going to blink the Roshan pit. Maybe Roshan's just as good at his skills. Maybe I spoke too soon. Taking out this Rosh is going to be fairly swift, but Denmark have a flare. Scouting this out, they know that they're inside the pit. And it's still dropping low. Can they do this quite fast enough? Power shot will fly. The Roshan is dropping. Hookshot in by the Clockwork. Garter looking for the steal, or at the very least he denied away from them. They're still going to go for this Roshan. 1400, 1100 HP. They'll be able to bring down the last hit for it. And Aegis is claimed by the Bristleback, but with the double shockwave from these Satyrs, they'll bring down the Slaughter, and the Invoker dies on the sidelines with a couple of Quills. They'll bring down the Lena, but now that his Aegis is down, Bristleback has no way to retreat, and Wind Ranger will find the Bane towards the north. Nightmare will save his life for a little while longer. Bristleback will fight to the death, and as long as they're careful, they shouldn't lose any of their own. Quills galore. The Clockwork needs Hand of God mech, and he's gonna get it. It's so hard to play the bristleback inside this game when the Chen has so many good ways to sustain his team. Of course, Bosnia get the Roshan, and they get the golden experience and the Aegis from, but they immediately burn the Aegis, and they lose 1 for 4, including that Aegis on top of it, technically like a 1 for 5 when it comes to how many HP pools Denmark had to work through. But Denmark are the vast victors. I still think that's the type of play that Bosnia have to go for. Of course it's risky. Of course it's very hard to fight Roshan against the likes of Clockwork, against all of the heroes coming out from Denmark that pick you apart so very easily if they know you're doing it. But if you stay inside your base, you're just going to last in this game longer than if you go for those risky plays. And maybe it works out in another situation for them. Who knows? Aghanim Scepter is up for the Wind Ranger after going for the Blink and Maelstrom. A very farmed Wind Ranger, in fact. Although, of course, like a 25-minute Aghanim Scepter on paper doesn't look that great, but she's gone for so many items before that it really is. And it makes the Aghanim Scepter all the more impactful that she has the Blink to line up perfect shackles pretty much every fight, and that she has the Maelstrom to bolster her damage further. Tiny is getting away with the Shadow Blade mostly because he has other heroes that can deal the scaling damage. If Tiny was a more traditional safe laner that needed to be relied upon in order to deal the DPS inside these fights, then the Shadow Blade probably isn't the greatest option. He would have been much better off going for like an Aghanim Scepter, an Assault Cuirass, something along those lines. But he can delay that for the more aggressive initiation items this game, as Denmark are so far ahead, and for the most part, those initiations have worked out for them. 7,500 is the net worth advantage for Team Denmark, and even more than that in the experience graphs. Denmark are feeling pretty good about their position inside this game, but Bosnia need to do something about this probably once Slaughter has this BKB. Without Slaughter's BKB rather, he drops so very quickly inside these fights, and without Slaughter, Bosnia don't have a great chance of taking these engagements if he's not going to be able to not only just get the Blink Crush initiation, but also stay alive so he can apply the amp damage to a couple more targets and maybe even get another crush off inside the fights. But Denmark are taking away map control. They'll seize the tier 2 tower up in the top lane, and Bosnia are kind of stuck inside their base for the most part. Right now Milan is safe in being in this bottom lane. He knows that there are enemy heroes probably inside the woods, but right now needs to think better of it since he hasn't seen them on the map for a long time. Milan will blink TP. This is completely successful, and even though there's nobody on the map, nobody on his side of the map, he doesn't know that. And the only purpose for being down there is so he's able to farm the BKB, which he now has. This is another timing window for Bosnia to look for a smoke gank and to try and make that play. They have a smoke available on the Bane and one in stock anyway, so even if they didn't have the one on the Bane, they'd be absolutely fine. I was going to purchase the last one, but this is their window for Bosnia to look for an impressive fight for their team. If this goes late, of course, they could access the Invoker's power, but oh no. Slaughter thought there would be somebody else around the corner, and that BKB's mostly wasted. That is so very sad for Milan. Not how he envisioned using that 10-second BKB. That's either a misclick, Slaughter getting a little ahead of himself, expecting there to be a Chen with backup, or he was trying to buy to something and instead presses the BKB button, which since they're in so close proximity, it probably was just the Midas misclick. Which he does get the Midas on the Chen creep, but Chen was going to replace that anyway. He has the Ancient Granite Golem now as a new buddy to add to his flock. The Ancient Golem is going to be so hard for Bosnia to deal with. They're already strapped for damage, and now they have to work through another 15% of allies' HP. Especially when your Tiny already has 2,000, that 15%, it's huge. It's like handing Tiny effectively like a Sanj worth of HP or so. A little bit less than that, but you get the picture. The tier 3 tower not going to be super healthy. If they can start working it down, even without the Aghanim Scepter on Tiny, it's still hitting like a truck, and he's going to just blink away right now. The Wind Ranger is able to constantly keep some chip up on this tower with the Chen creep army as well. They're able to siege very effectively. For the time being, Denmark have decided that it's better to just back off. Their top tier 2 tower is something that they don't really want to give away for free, and it was being pressured very heavily by the creeps, and Bosnia do have that relocate, which would have allowed them to maybe go for that trade and still have a couple of heroes around to defend. Denmark have been repelled, but to what end? Bosnia now have to deal with an Aghanim Scepter on this Tiny, and are going to have to deal with the big item on the Wind Ranger soon, too. But also these supports are getting quite a lot. And Invisvoker spots out the Chen. They're going to try to bring him down. He has Hand of God and Mech available. He's going to have to pop those soon. Hand of God, and Mech not even going to be used. Doesn't matter. He gets isolated, and the rest of his team just leaves him be. They're going to kill off the Granite Golem. That's a pretty important pick-off here for Bosnia, although I believe he is going to have another Granite Golem sooner rather than later. Actually, both of the creeps were taken out by the Chen inside those ancient camps, and it wasn't stacked by his allies, so he's not going to have another one to work with. Yeah, I'd expect the clockwork. And Lina just to farm up these creeps, so Chen's going to have a fresh one the next minute. That's pretty important. It's going to significantly decrease the impactfulness of having the Ags on the Chen. One of the big selling points is the fact that you're able to get ancients. Tiny with the Shadow Blade will run away. Do they have detection or any way to reveal him? No. Usually defensively the Shadow Blade's not going to be reliable if the Slaughter's around the corner, but he wasn't there for the amp damage. Instead they're going to chase for the Wind Ranger. He's going to Wind Run TP. The Tornado misses, but the Cold Snap's going to be there. And this is going to be Wind Ranger caught out inside a corner with an entire enemy team wailing on her. Easy kill for Slaughter. And just like that, Bosnia have found a couple of pickoffs and are showing signs of life even after a bit of a blunder coming out from the Slaughter using that long BKB charge, the 10-second charge, when it really wasn't necessary at all. Probably just a misclick coming out from him. They're doing it, and Denmark have been repelled. Still, if Denmark find a 5 versus 5 fight, I think they take it so very easily. The only way that they lose this game is if they get caught out by Bosnia's initiation from the Slaughter and relocate. If they play as a team, it's going to be so very hard for Bosnia to come back into this one. The Aegis of the Immortal is not going to be available for either of these teams for at least a minute. Denmark would love to have that before they siege high ground. That's probably what they're going to be waiting for this game. So for now, it's going to be a little bit of a slow, passive farming state. But maybe we're going to see a smoke up coming out from Bosnia. The pings come out from the IO. He's going to buddy up with the Invoker and the Bane. Hasn't pulled the trigger yet, and it looks like the IO's not going to. Instead, they're just going to run into the enemy lines with the Invoker, and as great as the Radiance Vision has been throughout this game, right now their wards aren't very good at protecting their own woods, or even protecting their safe laners. Invoker is going to try to get some precious intel for their team. The Invoker has a gem. We'll know if he's been spotted out. The Clockwork is going to be walking through the woods. They see the flare, but they don't see the clock. So Invoker will continue on his hunt, and maybe he bumps into a Chen very shortly, although now it's daytime and the Chen is going to have backup. Denmark are ready to fight, and it looks like it's their turn to amp up the aggression. Chen is going to purchase a smoke that'll be flying out to them momentarily, and with this smoke, it's going to coincide so very nicely with the Roshan respawn timer, a very fast respawn actually. Close to minimum, just a couple of seconds longer, and Roshan's back up inside the pit. Denmark know about this. They spotted out with the flare, but Bosnia, I don't think they've caught eyes on it yet. They don't really want to use their courier for it either, because the Bristleback really wants his Shiva's Guard. Having that armor item and in general the slow is really synergistic for Bristleback and is really good for his kit. But is it going to stop most of his problems? Ooh, hold that thought. We have a hookshot in mid lane. They're not going to find anybody. Hand of God going to keep the Lina pretty sustained. They're all going to survive, but yeah, the Shiva's Guard on the Bristleback, it's going to help for sure. It's by no means a bad item to have, especially against the Tiny, who doesn't have the greatest attack speed to begin with this item build. I mean, drums, treads, as well as having the Shadow Blade do start to add up, but it's something like an Assault Cuirass Moonshard. He's still going to be kited, however, and he's still able to be locked down. If he gets shackled inside these fights, they can just leave him. There's no reason to focus down the Bristleback. Save him for last, and once he has no team backup, it's very easy for them to deal with. But what's not very easy for one of these teams to deal with, Bosnia can't really push out against these creeps. Their supports are incredibly single target focused, and look at that tier 3 tower melt. They'll get a Nightmare onto the Wind Ranger, but I don't think they can commit, and they're just going to lose melee barracks. They have no glyph for a couple of seconds here. This is a perfect timing window for Denmark, because they have the Aegis on the Tiny. He's just going to wail away this melee barracks, and we'll be able to take out that building. EMP Tornado combo is going to fly. Will be enough to drain a lot of Tiny's mana, but he still has that second life. Bristleback's running headlong into the enemy team. He really wants something to stick on, but can't quite find it. Shackle not going to latch, but Bristleback's isolated himself, so maybe they're able to focus him down. Still with the Glimmer Cape, he's going to survive, and Crush Initiation. The Slaughter has found the Wind Ranger. Wind Ranger is still surviving by the skin of her teeth, blinks away, and she survives on double-digit HP unless Slaughter can find the Crush, and he can't. What he will find is the Lina, and this is going to be a consolation prize for the Slaughter. On the backlines, the Tiny's going to lose his life, and now is left alone. Blink down towards the south. The Tiny has the Shadow Blade, and there's no detection on this Bristleback. He's too far away from the rest of his team, and I think the Tiny gets out of here alive. They pick off a couple of supports board, sure, and they lose the Aegis Denmark, but what they got means so much more for them. They'll gladly take a 2,000 gold swing in the favor of Bosnia for them to be able to take out the melee barracks in bottom lane. It just means so much more for their team and what it translates into inside these fights. Having an Assault Cuirass on the Slaughter, of course, is going to be very important for Bosnia. But this Assault Cuirass on the Slaughter, although it is very synergistic for his kit, it doesn't feel like he's going to be able to actually stick on his targets this game, as his BKB dwindles in duration. The longer he's sitting on this Black King bar, the more he has to use it for these fights, the less impactful his Slaughter is going to be. And even with BKB up, it's not like that's a guaranteed way to allow him to get inside the fights. He could get tossed away by the Tiny, or Cogs will still block him off, Force Staff to kite him around, and it's a hard game to be the Slaughter. Although that last fight was a good initiation from him, it came too late. It was after they'd already taken out the buildings. Now Tiny continues farming up. It's going to be a butterfly for him. This is an incredible way for him to deal with the physical damage coming out from Bosnia. I think the other option for him, Manta style, would have been completely reasonable too, to be able to purge off the likes of the Slow from the Bristleback and the minus armor from the Slaughter. But you know what? I think butterfly might even be better. It's really good for sieging those high ground buildings and just sitting your super fat Tiny onto that high ground spot. They might be missing the fact that they don't have an Assault Cuirass, but what they do have is 4 Ags. The only hero that doesn't have an Aghanim Scepter is the Lina, and she should probably invest in one. If this game drags on late, but for now it's just going to be a medallion for, you know what, another high ground sieging item to go into the Solar Crest. They have no way to deal with this evasion, and they won't for a long time, because the Slaughter and Bristleback can't really afford to go for MKBs. And now the Bristleback's going to get caught out, the hookshot will fly. Bristleback, however, is too tanky, and they don't necessarily know where the enemy's side is, and if there was backup there, they really don't want to take that fight. They'll get a tornado, but the Crushing Machine is onto the Wind Ranger. She's able to pop her BKB and run, and it looks like she's going to be sent home very easily too. There's not much they can do about that Wind Ranger, but maybe they'll be able to kill off this Chen. A consolation prize for Bosnia as they get one on the retreat. Now look for another initiation, excuse me. Missed that one. The Crush fails, and they're not able to catch the Clockwork or the Tiny. Tiny again going to walk out of here with his Shadow Blade. A-okay. They'll catch vision of the Clockwork. Shiva is going to be popped. The Clockwork is going to be pursued by the Slaughter, but a point-blank hookshot. The Clockwork's found himself a little bit of space, pops a battery assault, has a Force Staff, but not a lot of mana on top of it, so we'll only be able to use it as Force, and he's completely spotted out. Another amp damage will be applied, and won't be able to escape here, it seems. Will be brought down by the Bristleback. That's a nice exchange for Bosnia in a vacuum, but they lose a tier 3 tower for it. An offlaner support for a tier 3. Again, Denmark are getting the better exchange when it comes to the objectives. The Bosnia just don't have a very good team tailored at taking them down. A tornado will fly. Not going to cancel a TP. Just a little bit late there on the Deafening Blast and Tornado. If you switch the targeting from both of those spells, the Deafening Blast, of course, does nothing. Well, at least the Tornado is on the point. They're constantly going to be on the back foot with a team that really has difficulty clearing out these creeps. Of course, Bristleback can tank them and take them down with the Quills, but Bristleback's the only one that really has convincing AoE. At this point, you can't even consider Invoker's Meteor to really be an impactful spell. Only 4 points effectively in the Exhort. Invoker with his Aghanim Scepter will scale incredibly well as the game progresses later, and Deafening Blast is going to be a super important spell, especially at stopping Tiny's damage output, since he hasn't gone for a BKB. With no way to purge off or deal with that disarm, he should be pretty fine, but now with the Vlad's up to also bolster his damage output, and also with the Wind Ranger, who's picked up a Black King bar of her own, it feels like Denmark are still reasonably prepared, even if it does get to that late game scenario. And now Tiny, even if he's not able to hit, you're probably not going to be able to hit him with the Butterfly now up and running. The evasion is going to stop the majority of the Bosnia's damage output. Bosnia team's damage output. They really just don't have anything else outside of the right clicks for their heroes to be able to do the damage. The Quills from Bristleback are okay, but their nukes are very limited. The biggest downside of the Wex Invoker, if you're playing this passively, is that you don't have your teamfight combo being nearly as scary at this point. Of course, you're going to be able to drain a good amount of mana, but you have the Arcanes on the Chen, and I wouldn't mind Arcanes on the Lina. In fact, I'm surprised that they only have one pair, but it just doesn't do enough really to stop them from getting off their full combos. That mana burn, still Tiny will be sitting at a reasonable amount of mana, at least enough for one combo. And that's all he really needs to get off inside these fights, and more than anything, it just doesn't stop him from right-clicking. The max out Wex is going to mean that the Deafening Blast still is very impactful for the disarm, and that's one of the most important things Invoker can get off inside these fights. If he's able to Deafening Blast the Tiny, that's probably how they win. Just Deafening Blast the Tiny, split apart the engagement, and focus down these auxiliary heroes so they're not able to sustain the Tiny. Of course, trying to focus down the front lines, the win range, and the Tiny is something, but you really need to take the mech, the Hand of God off the table, the Medallion, the Vladimir is offering, which all are starting to stack up in a pretty massive fashion for Denmark. Denmark will keep up the pressure here, but they don't need to get antsy, and they don't need to go for a high ground push, it feels. Just calm down, wait up for the next Roshan. It should be coming fairly shortly. The Chen assortment of creeps is pretty interesting. We have a Granite Golem, a little Mud Golem, a Black Dragon, as well as a Dark Troll Summoner. I'd really like to see them, net the IO and kill off Vita. Whew, that was an easy kill. Yeah, you probably shouldn't have been outside of your base there, and the Shadowblade Tiny is going to punish you for it. But yeah, getting the Thunderhide would be amazing with that plus damage, or stacking with the Vlads could be absolutely awesome. Attack speed bonus and attack damage bonus for Tiny, yes please. He benefits so greatly from both of those. Tiny is on the hunt again. Oh, Slider finds a jump on the Lina. The fight's breaking out on top away from the Tiny as he takes down the melee barracks. What matters here is that they're able to take out the structures, so Tornado really not going to help all that much. In fact, might have just secured Tiny the racks, but now disarmed. There's a very long disarm from that Deafening Blast. Still's going to throw the toss, dealing a good amount of damage, and nobody else has died on the backlines, although now they focus down this Tiny. They have the amp damage rate. He got what he came for. Even though the Tiny is going to go down here, he has buyback, and that means very little, especially since they won't be able to mop up any of the Chen creeps on the backlines too. A Tiny plus Lina for an IO on paper is a pretty bad trade for Denmark, but when you factor in the melee barracks, although they're leaking a couple of kills here and there, it just doesn't matter. We finally have the Black King bar for the Bristleback, but this BKB by itself doesn't feel like it's going to be enough for them to be able to convincingly take engagements. This is a very small window of opportunity where Bosnia are going to try to force out the buyback from the Tiny, but they still have to work through tier 1s and tier 2 towers. By the time they get to the high ground, I don't think Tiny will even have to buy back. He'll just naturally respawn, then reserve that buyback gold. Although another death, and it looks like he's not going to have enough to actually buy back. Hookshot in, they're going to isolate the starter. Force out a BKB charge from him, although those mean less and less as the game transpires. The Bristlebacks go on ham. Not forced to pop his BKB to get this Lina kill, it seems. A little Light Strike Array is going to connect. He's getting kited, Hookshot in, and they're just stopping the Bristleback from doing anything. They'll kill off the starter in the back lines. Wind Ranger is dishing. She's going to look for an IO kill. Barely survives with the high ground. Pops her BKB. And is now going to look for the Invoker instead. Focus Fire. The Maelstrom is doing so much damage. He doesn't have Ghost Walk for 2 seconds. Shackled before he can use it, and Invoker is forced to buy back into the game. Wind Ranger has a win run, but not a blink for 5 seconds. Hookshot is going to miss, and maybe with that hookshot not connecting, Wind Ranger is going to die. Sunstrike is going to be thrown. Bristleback picks up the haste, but now has to retreat because the Wind Ranger has backup, and he does not. They're forced to defend their tier 4 towers that got really banged up while all of that was happening, and Denmark get the kill exchange and aren't forced to buy back on their Tiny, who is still going to have that probably for the next fight, although for now needs to farm himself up 200 some odd gold to have that up. Denmark now are going to wait out for Roshan. Sunstrike's going to be dropped inside the pit, but not scout out Roche. We'll only scout out the Stout Shield. That is still inside the pit. I think that was Tiny's, if I'm not mistaken. They'll destroy it. Actually, it couldn't have been Tiny's, right? That was from when Bosnia took that Roshan earlier. Denmark now, once they get the second life on the Tiny, it's going to be so very easy for them to push high ground. I'm a little bit sad they kills off this Thunderhide. No, Tiny, no! They're not going to have that aura for their team. Chen's creep still going to set on the plus armor as well as the plus HP. But I really do like that aura from the Thunderhide now. It's so good. So good with Tiny. I hope we get to see it this game, but even without it, Denmark are still very comfortable since they have 2 lanes ahead of Bosnia. Even though Invoker scales pretty well in the late game, and Bristleback and Slaughter are about the same thing. They scale pretty well. It's not a Spectre, it's not an Anti-Mage, it's not a Dusa or a Gyrocopter, one of these heroes that can come back from the Super and Mega Creep scenarios. The only time they leave their base is when they're smoked up, and Bosnia have to go for this now. Roshan has just recently respawned, and they need to make sure that they deny this away from Denmark. It's going to be a hard move to make. It's very risky. They'll spot out the Roche, and maybe they're able to steal it away from the enemy team. They'll pop the Lincoln's effect with the goo, now start stacking up minus armor. This Roshan's dropping so quickly. Denmark are going to scout this out, however. Now focus fire onto the Bane. He's able to turn around, for the Fiend's Grip on the Wind Ranger as Roshan falls. Slaughter gets the Aegis. Can they win the fight afterwards? The Bane is going to die. The Invoker's down for 90. Bristleback is dishing, kills off the Clockwork, but is now going to get tossed up into the air, and his BKB time is being wasted. The Bristleback has the cheese. He's going to go into the Chen as well as the Lina, but netted down to the ground. It's going to be the Wind Ranger and the Tiny. They start focusing down the Slaughter, who is going to lose his Aegis here in just a second. Tossed into the Io, who loses his Aegis on impact with the ground. The Bristleback dies even with the cheese. He wasn't able to pop it. Surprisingly enough, I thought he'd survive for longer, but just was chain stunned after his BKB wore off. And even though they get the Aegis, it's another situation where Bosnia have to make that play. They have to go for Roshan. You have to make sure that the enemy team can't just waltz high ground and take your base. But unsuccessfully so. A good attempt, but they're too far behind at this point. When it comes to actual fighting potential, their net worth disadvantage isn't even that big, but their ability to take engagements is almost nil, especially when Slaughter gets jumped. Wind Ranger kills him off for a dominating spree. And it looks like Denmark are about to do it in this best of one, securing their spot in the upper bracket of the Pro Dota 2 National Cup. Let's see if they're able to accomplish this. Bristleback is going to be a nuisance here and still has the cheese. Since he wasn't able to use it in the last fight, he is going to have that effective second HP pool to throw into the enemy's side this time. But we saw how ineffective he was without his BKB. Blink Crush. They catch out too. The Slaughter is forced to pop his magic immunity down to 5 seconds if I'm not mistaken. But 4 staffing away, they just kite them around. That initiation from Lon does next to nothing. He's going to be shackled to a tree, but relocating to the base is going to be stunned there as the shackle is going to stretch all the way towards that side. For now, Denmark won't be able to find that opening. Maybe they play things safe. Maybe they wait for the next Roshan. But more importantly is the fact that Bristleback, Slaughter, and Invoker all have had to buy back in the last couple of fights. Invoker will have his back in 3 minutes, but this is a 3-minute window where if Denmark find a pickoff, and they might with this smoke, the game will just be over if it's on one of those crucial targets. Invoker as well as Bristleback are inside the base. Radiant have no vision of them now, but if they catch eyes on him, Wind Ranger might just jump. Invoker's defensively postured behind his tier 3, and behind his melee barracks, really, because that's where he has to be, or else they just lose. The smoke's about to expire. Wind Ranger is going to be shown. She focus fires the pops her BKB, and Io's down. The arrows will follow. Bristleback's in the middle of the fray. He's going to be used up into the air. Still saves his BKB, still saves his cheese. Is going to look for this kill on a Fury, and will find that successfully. There's buyback available for the Wind Ranger if she wants to get back into this fight, but that might be a little over-aggressive. They're going to lose a couple of heroes here, and that's fine as long as Denmark don't die back. That is a successful hold coming up from Bosnia. The top tier 3 is going to be dropped down to about 200 HP, but will end up surviving. Bosnia are hanging on by a thread. The Invoker's combination is now doing quite a lot of damage, and he can use effectively every single one of his spells inside the fight with such a short cooldown and Invoke. 2 seconds right now with that with the Aghanim Scepter up. The advantage is still going in favor of Denmark. Even though Bosnia hold, they don't make a good exchange when it comes to getting those next couple items online. And really the progression for them is almost stopped. It really has. Slaughter's going to be going for an MKB to deal with this butterfly from the Tiny. That's the next major item. Probably one of the few major items that they're going to get this game. Invoker's progression after that Ags, it really isn't going to be very quick. After such an early Raxing coming out from Team Denmark. Excuse me. And now Denmark on the back foot, or at least repelled for now. I wouldn't say they're on the back foot, even though I just did. You know, they're still in a very commanding position this game when it comes to the control they have on this map. Well, it looks like they're going to play things safe, wait out for the next Roshan. One of the only ways, maybe even the only way they lose this game, is if they get too over-aggressive and try to take fights that they're not 100% prepared for. They have the Solar Crest on the Lina, but this is going to be mitigated a little bit by that MKB that I talked about on the Slaughter. But still no buyback for 4 minutes on the Slaughter, no buyback for a little under 4 for the Bristleback, and no buyback for a minute on the Invoker. But by the next fight, I'd expect Invoker to have his available. Is going to sell his boots, buy himself boots of travel, and Invoker is pretty much where he's going to be for a large portion inside this game. I want to see him get up level 23 so that he can have the radial deafening blast. With the Aghanim Scepter you can get that pre-level 25, but just get higher levels than the Invoker so we can see that come into play. It is going to be so impactful, especially considering the BKB timing windows on the Wind Ranger only being 6 seconds, and since Tiny hasn't gone for one at all. We finally get to see the Thunderhide aura, though. This is pretty exciting. Stacking with the Vlads, this is a lot of plus damage for your Tiny. A stack additively should be 30% extra damage, and then 15 extra attack speed for the War Drums, too. It's really quite impressive how much that means for a Tiny. since he's sitting on 317 base damage. It's actually crazy. They're going to give him about the damage you'd expect to see from an MKB, even more than that, actually. Just the straight up bonus damage there. And now they're going to smoke. Denmark, if they find a pick off, they get the game ended, really. And they can keep on doing this. It's a luxury that Denmark can afford, going for these smokes whenever they want to. Bosnia, however, are tied down to the smokes. It's not a luxury for them, it's a necessity. It's probably their only way to get out of the base. As individuals, they are going to find the Chen creeps. They'll bring down that Thunderhide, so Aura's not going to come into play in this next fight, but Bane will be obliterated inside his base. Do they have detection? They don't even need it. Power shot from the Wind Ranger going to no-scope him. Denmark now are going to call in their Chen army, and they're going to go for this push without the Bane. It's so much harder for Bosnia to take this fight. Although, Denmark are going to play things a little bit cool. They're just keeping pressure on these lanes and making sure they don't overextend. Blink away from that viscous nasal goo. And then Tiny's back with the rest of his team. If that pickoff was on the Slaughter, Bristlebacker, Invoker, this game could be over now. Invoker doesn't have buyback because he doesn't have the gold for it. At this stage in the game, he needs so much to be able to use that buyback cooldown. Blink Crush, catch out the Chen, a couple of smacks, they obliterate him. The physical damage with that amp is stupid. In the meantime, they are going to pop a BKB on the Bristleback and chase forward for the Wind Ranger. Trying to look for this kill is very difficult. They have no way to cancel that TP, and Fury's going to be fine. They lose the tier 3 tower up towards top as they buy back on the Bane. They're going to chase forward. They need to kill off this Tiny. They're going to force staff into the trees. He's not TPing out here. In fact, he has just run straight down the lane. And the Invoker is not going to be able to catch up. Blink, Boots of Travel. Tiny should be just fine. And they will just give up the pursuit for him. Another buyback spent by Bosnia. They're hanging into this game, but not by much. It really just depends on how this next Roshan goes down. In a minute, we'll see when that respawns, or maybe this double damage. This is a Moonshard Tiny DD with Vlad Zora and everything that he could probably just take the top racks, I want to say. He can definitely backdoor it. If he had a BKB, I'd say you even go for that play. He's going to pop his Flutter, and he wants to pop some fools here, and well, maybe the Slaughter is going to be the one to get caught out. Milan looks like he's going to sprint out to safety. The Slaughter is still doing quite a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but the Craggy coming in from the Tiny is going to mean he's pretty safe. And it looks like he gets a melee barracks here. I don't think they're prepared for this. They're out of position. They're going to relocate up towards top. Tiny will drop the Avalanche and blink away. That is a very safe play from the Tiny, and the right play, I'd expect. He wouldn't have been able to get it, but he forces out to relocate for it. Not much, if anything. Can they get the Clockwork out to safety? It looks like answers. No, he gets almost two-shot by Milan. Maybe I'm underestimating the power of a late-game Slaughter. Jeez, that's so terrifying. He's going to have buyback soon, too. So Denmark are really just going to have to wait for this next Roshan, which we'll see when it comes up in just a couple of seconds. This is the most important part of this game when you get to the late game scenarios, and Roshan's going to respawn in about 2 minutes. So we're going to play things safe, play things cool. The only heroes in this game without buyback, the Lina, the Io, the Bane, and the Clockwork, really are not the ones that they need buyback for. Chen's army is looking a little bit sad. Only one Black Dragon, hardly can call that an army. But now he gets a Centaur Conqueror too to throw into it. But at this point, the Chen creeps just get dropped so quickly with the amp damage that they are less impactful and mostly there just for the auras. Not actually for their spell casts. And the aura from the Ancient Black Dragon, of course, is by no means bad, but I think they'd probably benefit a little bit more from the Wild Wing. I think the Wild Wing gives 3 armor, and the Black Dragon only gives 2, but that said, the Black Dragon is vastly tankier. Denmark are going to go ahead and push up top lane with their Tiny. The split push potential is ridiculous if they can ever pull Bosnia outside of their base and know that they've left. Clockwork Flare is going to fly mid. The Bristleback feels comfortable in order to stay out of his base a little while longer because I believe his team does control a gem. They have for the longest of times. The Invoker has been holding on to gems that he's either purchased or picked up. I think this is actually, yeah, the Lina's gem, the one from Denmark, which is very important for their team. The Tiny's laying in wait up towards top lane. He's not going aggressive here. He just wants to know where the enemy team is, and right now he really doesn't. He sees the Invoker, or actually he didn't see the Invoker. There wasn't a Radiant Sentry down the ground. He was Ghostwalk. But now we'll see the Invoker as he Deafening Blast, and he sees the Slaughter. But that's it. With just these 2 heroes showing in the map, the Tiny can't go for any sort of aggressive play, and just kind of has to chill. Cheese is going to be dropped inside the base. His Bristleback looks like he wants to replace that with some sort of item. Monkey Kingbar could be completely reasonable for him. Maybe he just goes for an Abyssal Blade. I'm not sure what you pick up for the Bristleback of this game. No matter what it is, you either need to be able to hit through the evasion of the Tiny, or just be less kiteable. I don't think there's an item that really offers that super well. Probably just NKB for him. Yeah, it looks like it is going to be just that. But now Roshan's up. This is what we've been waiting for a while. The Roshan is going to be dropped very quickly by Denmark. Look how fast that Tiny swings. And they'll bring in some Chen creeps too for good measure. But this is Tiny without the auras offered by some of those extra creeps. He has 3,000 HP when he's chilling next to this Ancient Granite Golem. He's going to drop an item. His Shadowblade is going to be picked up by the Chen. Shadowblade Chen, although he can't use it right now, is going to be holding on to that as Tiny is going to grab the cheese. I might have liked it if they gave the Aegis to the Tiny instead, but you know what? For all intents and purposes, these heroes are mostly interchangeable, but top lane, they get the pick off on the Lina. They don't even need the Sunstrike. The damage from the Slaughter is so very good, and now Lina should know that there's a ward around this vicinity, or else they can't go for that jump. But the bigger item here is a double damage for the Tiny, and the Thunderhide aura. Alright, it's go time. It's go time for Denmark. They're saving this double damage for a little while longer. Tiny needs to get there relatively soon, but I think you just go. Did they really not ping it out, or did they not see it? I don't know. Tiny has 40 seconds to skip that top rune spot, and I think he should be able to. He has Blink, he has Flutter, and even without it, is walking fast enough to where he should pick this up to get maximum value out of the timing of the double damage rune if they know it's around. If they did, I'd expect Denmark to just straight up barrel down a lane. There's no reason not to. But it looks like this double damage is going to be unclaimed. That's very unfortunate for Denmark. That would have been awesome. It's like giving your Tiny a Divine Rapier for 2 minutes. Or not 2 minutes, but yeah, he doesn't have the bottle to hold on to that for that long. But for the next little while inside the game, you have a Rapier that you can't drop. It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. But this Rapier is going to turn into a Manta style, which is significantly less impressive. But still not bad. Just get a rune on the Tiny. Both of them are pretty good for sieging. Denmark are going to push out their side lanes and keep up the pressure, but it really feels like this game state is slowed down to a crawl because of the lack of fights. Everybody pretty much has buyback, except for this Bristleback, who has bought out for his Monkey King bar. Killing off one, however, is difficult enough. Tiny is going to get these illusions brought down. They'll disarm them and, in general, just take them out. Although Deafening Blast is on CD for 30 seconds, I don't think that's a big enough timing window for Denmark to do anything. They're playing things very slow and steady. They even have an Ancient Granite Golem in reserve for this creep army of the Chen. Denmark are going to push through mid lane, push through top lane, push through bottom lane. Just make sure that all of the lanes are going to stay behind about that line. Tiny still maintains control of the Blink. If he ever finds a spot where the enemy team are out of position, can go for the melee barracks. But the double damage play we saw in the melee barracks top hasn't meant much of anything. Hookshot's going to be fishing, but not find anything. It's a Blink Crush connects onto two. They won't commit onto the Lina and the Chen, however. This is a delicate situation for both of these teams. Neither of them really wants to fully commit. It's only a matter of time before they waltz up high ground. They're going to focus fire the melee barracks. Fiend's Grip is going to be forced out. The hookshot is going to miss. Wind Ranger, however, is going to lose her Aegis here. Nightmare onto the Tiny is going to be taken off by a little bit more damage. Laguna Blade will be thrown. The Aegis down on the deck, but the Slaughter kind of has to retreat here. But then again, so does the Tiny. They're going to toss in one of their buddies. The Lina is going to miss the Light Strike Ray. Io's further towards the north. They lose their Chen on the backlines. This Bristleback's man fighting against the Tiny effectively. With the BKB, the Kraken doesn't bother him at all. Tiny down. The Wind Ranger stuck inside their base. Gets a good shackle onto Milan. We'll be able to bring down the Slaughter, but Slaughter has buyback, so does the Tiny. They want to end this game now as they're focusing the buildings with the Chen creeps, and they do it! Denmark with the victory after a long hold coming out from Bosnia. Well played for them. Denmark will find themselves a slot in the upper bracket. And then the Pro Dota 2 National Cup and lower bracket Bosnia are still inside this tournament, but are a lot closer to elimination, unfortunately for them. Best of one tiebreaker. That's all that we're going to have for the evening. Thanks for tuning in to hitbox.tv/ProDotaEN. If you like the casting, I'm GrandisV. You can find me on Twitter at GrandisV. And I'll be going live a little bit later today for some of the Game Show Global Esports Cup on the Azubu channels there. Just a shameless self-plug. And, well, we'll still have more National Cup here, but not today. Unfortunately, that's it for tonight. Denmark will be happy with their victory. Well played to them. I really did like their draft in general. A lot of the issues for Bosnia stemmed from the fact that they weren't able to have map control. Denmark's ward vision consistently throughout that game was amazing, especially when it needed to be. Like, when they needed to make sure that they weren't picked off and they need to make sure that Bosnia didn't get momentum, they knew exactly where they were coming from, and that's impressive. And thanks for tuning in. With that, I'll leave you, and we'll just go back to some music as we close out the day for the Pro Dota 2 National Cup. See you later, guys. Thanks for watching.